Welcome to Safest Family on the Block, where we talk about how we can teach our kids about safety. And Donna Angevine is an expert instructor in firearms and hand-to-hand training, and particularly good at talking to our kids about situational awareness and mindset training without scaring the bejesus out of them. So let's not wait any longer. I cannot wait for you to meet Donna today on Safest Family on the Block.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Safest Family on the Block, where knowledge is power. I'm your host, Jason, and joining me today is Donna Miles. Hello, Donna.
Hey, Jason, good to be here.
So glad to have you on today. Donna is the author of Hard Target Living, which is part the story about how she got very serious about protecting herself and her family, and part a lot of very good advice about how you can do the same or do something similar in the way that fits your life the best. And so I'm very excited to have you on today, Donna. I know why you're awesome because I've read your book and I've spoken to some of our mutual friends. But why don't you take a moment and let the audience know why you're awesome?
Oh, well, thank you. So, as is told in the book, my opening prologue, in 2008, I experienced a violent home invasion and was completely unprepared. Prior to that experience, I really didn't think about my personal safety. In fact, it was a lot of my bad habits that allowed the home invasion to occur so easily for what turned out to be not a very skilled home invader. I'm not going to go into the details because I think if people want to hear that, they can get the book. But my response initially to that was really based on pure rage. I was so offended that someone had shown up in my bedroom in the middle of the night while I was lying there sleeping, unexpected, and attacked me in my sanctuary. That I thought, well, the next time this happens, I am going to be super prepared. I'm going to be lethal. So I immerse myself in really high levels of defensive and tactical firearms training. And I'm not talking about going to an indoor gun range and firing a firearm at paper targets, 5 feet away. I'm talking going out into the desert, rolling around on the ground, shooting under cars. And my then husband actually built an indoor gun range in our barn, and we literally trained for hours every day. And that at first was really empowering. I felt like a real, badass. I can, shoot a target, a moving target within seconds of drawing from concealment. Um, but the mindset that that was my total package for living a safe life started to wear on me because I think the average law abiding person doesn't want to nurture their willingness to be violent, and that's what I felt like I was doing, was like nurturing my willingness to kill if necessary. And while I believe that we have the fundamental right to use lethal force if somebody is threatening our well-being, I didn't want that to be my sole you know, tool. So I met people in the executive protection industry through my firearms training, started doing some of that kind of training and realized, wow, there's so much to just mindset and prevention and avoidance and designing your life. And this is such common sense information. And why are we not taught this information as civilians, like nutritional information? We don't just eat whatever we want to and not know anything about nutrition because, oh, a doctor can save us, or we can get shocked back to life. We we learn principles of nutrition so we can take steps ourselves to be independent in managing risk. And I thought, well, this is something that I think everybody should learn to do, and that's why I do what I do now.
That makes sense. It's the story, and again, buy the book, read the book because the story is great. Quick spoiler: the home invader, you beat him so bad his ancestors felt it.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, but the story is it's almost like the first two-thirds of a revenge movie. You got the inciting incident, then the training montage, and then the
Yep.
only thing you didn't do was go find him and his family. But
Not saying that thought didn't cross my mind on more than
yeah,
one occasion.
and then you have that epiphany that I think a lot of people who get serious about self defense training do, which is they reach to a point where they're confident enough in their own ability to inflict harm that they no longer want to.
Right.
That is, it demystifies it, and ironically, the more trained you are, the better practice you are, the less likely you are to be victimized. In part
Absolutely.
because you're not looking for trouble, and so you're willing to de-escalate, and also because bad guys are cowards,
Yep.
and they see the way that you walk, they see the way you look at a room, they see you seeing them, and they decide that, you know what, I'm not going to bother that person, which makes me feel
Absolutely.
a little bad for the next person they see, but
And I think that as well. Not that I want that I think, oh, go pick somebody else to
mhm,
victimize, but
yeah,
and that's another reason I believe it's important for more people to learn this information, and I think it needs to be taught in schools because being victimized, well, unfortunately for some people that it happens to them in their own homes as children, but for other children it starts to happen when they get bullied in school. So learning how to present as a hard target really can go a long way towards deterrence, and that should be the focus of training, not focus on worrying about the threats that are out there. There are threats out there. We know there are threats in the world, and they
yeah.
threats don't just come in human form, and we know how to manage threats when they come in other forms. In the book I talk about how we manage risk for harm from a violent human is the same as how we manage it from a hurricane or a virus or a speeding car while we're trying to cross the street. It's really very simple. So
And that
that
brings up one of my favorite parts of the book. This is one of the things is that when you've been training for a long time, as both of us have, and in over the course of my podcast, I've read probably 200 books by various authors. That self defense and self protection are very, very simple. And so once you've read 30 introductions to self defense books, it's you really quick run out of new things to encounter. But in yours, the way that you explain situational awareness in the context of teaching your kid how to cross the street safely was absolutely brilliant. I'd love it if you'd share that insight with my audience because it was so simple and yet so effective.
well, the, we start teaching kids to manage risk as children, and crossing the street is one of the first things that we teach them. I believe that situational awareness has become in security training has been too simplified to just mean being aware of your surroundings. But I believe that there are multiple skill sets that you have to build upon. And so I just relate it to when we teach kids to look both ways before they cross, we're not teaching them to look for a red truck or a green car. If we were just teaching them to look for vehicles, then we'd never get our kids into a car. They'd be terrified of cars. What we're teaching them is that they need to assess how much time they have to safely cross the road. And that's based on how much distance there is between any moving vehicle. And the fact that if they don't assess and make sure they have enough time and make sure they have enough distance, because they have no shielding of their fleshy little bodies, the impact is going to really harm them. And so teaching them those parameters, that time, managing time, distance, and using shielding is the basic foundational principle for managing risk. That understanding is part of situational awareness. And I think that I've just gone a little step further in what has been explained because I think that a lot of the situational awareness training is geared towards law enforcement, military, security personnel who just have this innate knowledge and understanding of what code white or code yellow, for example, means. But for the average person, that doesn't tell them what to do, what the action steps are for having your situational awareness turned on and when to turn your situational awareness up. So I think I've just taken it a little step further.
Yeah. And that's a really good point that you make about situational awareness training. Like our mutual friends Chris and Mary Beth, who work in executive protection. And Chris, of course, was special forces there before that, where for a very long time, how you built situational awareness was you spent a decade in a career where if you weren't paying attention, you died.
Exactly.
Which I understand why they have good situational awareness, but that's not particularly helpful to civilians.
Right.
And the other piece is a lot of their situational awareness training. You mentioned the Cooper color codes, situational wise condition yellow and whatnot. Those were built for people who clock in
Yep.
and go do a shift in high risk areas, and then come home and clock out. And they're appropriate for that, but they're also exhausting.
Yeah.
And so that's it's not appropriate to the context of a civilian just trying to live their life or a parent trying to protect their children.
Right.
And so by adapting it to more simple things, more everyday things, because crossing the street, you're not looking for cars while you're walking from your front door to the sidewalk. You're not looking for cars when you get into school. You're looking
Right.
for cars when you're crossing the street where cars are normally found.
Right.
And so yeah, that was a very particularly cool insight in the book.
Well, I also think it's helpful for the general population when you point out areas of their life where they're already naturally using situational awareness. In workshops, and generally my workshops are filled with women more than men, but I say, if your husband is behaving in a manner that is not typical for him, but you say, "What's going on? Are you okay?" And he says, "Yeah, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine," but he's not. That's using your situational awareness because you understand what his baseline behavior is. You know when something is off or atypical or inconsistent, and that's the anomaly. So when you point out you use this, and you don't just need it to stay safe from risk of harm, it enhances the overall quality of your life. I use the example when we first moved to Florida, there are so many more birds here than in Washington State. And at first, it just sounded like this cacophony of different birds. And now I hear the individual bird sounds and I know what those birds, I can't name them, but I can identify them. I'm like, oh, that's I never knew what an eagle sounded like until we moved here. There's a couple of eagles that nest down the street. And I had only heard them in movies, and the sounds that they use to depict the sound of an eagle in movies is not how eagles sound. They almost sound like a small bird. So now when I hear the individual bird sounds, I know what those birds are, and that has enhanced the overall quality of my life in addition to preparing me to be safer because I can identify when something is happening that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, that's an important insight, I think, for having situational awareness. That it's not head on a swivel, only sit with your back to the wall. Condition yellow's my personality.
Right.
It's mindful, curious awareness where
Yeah.
by walking through the world with that attention, with that curiosity for anomalous events, things you don't expect, things you haven't seen before, you will spot the bad guys. You will see
Yep.
the car coming, but you'll also see that pretty sunset, and
Yep.
you'll see that puppy that needs a scratch behind the ears.
Yes,
And if we're not paying attention,
absolutely.
we miss out on those beautiful things. And not for nothing, but the world has more beautiful things than terrifying things. And if we pay
100%.
attention, we'll get to experience those.
I agree 100%. Yep. And for parents, I can never stop thinking about examples of situational awareness in everyday life because I was thinking about how kids use emojis to communicate information they might not want their parents to know. So, a good example of having situational awareness as a parent is to be aware of what these different emojis mean so that when you see your child using them, you recognize, oh, I don't think my daughter should be sending eggplant emoji to a boy or her teacher or whoever.
To her teacher would be an issue, you
Yeah,
know. And yeah, and even noticing that with the boy, whatever your family's approach to sexual education is,
right.
that can be, oh, who's Jared?
Yeah,
Has he been here? Has he been over for dinner yet?
yep,
Well, if you're having those kind of conversations with a young man, you know the rule is he comes for dinner.
exactly.
So when are we having Jared over for dinner?
Yep,
But that conversation can't even happen if you're not up on the lingo as only people who aren't up on the lingo would say.
right.
So I had a question from your story in your book and from your
Okay.
training. And one experience that I've noticed, and there's some data to back it up, is that generally speaking, there are exceptions, of course. Men get into self-defense training to prepare for the big fight because they're afraid they're not quite bad enough of an ass. Mm, By contrast, most women get into physical self-defense training after they've been attacked, and that's something that I think too few self-defense instructors understand.
Yep,
If you're a woman who has just been sexually assaulted and you sign up for a self-defense class, and the next thing you know, you're being grabbed aggressively by the wrist by a 6'2" ex-marine, that can be incredibly traumatic. It re-traumatizes you, and you go away and you never come back for more training.
yep.
And it sounds like your training was good because you leaned into it hard. But I'm sure you've encountered this phenomenon in your own training programs. And I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, and it's a topic that I bring up in all of my workshops. Is I acknowledge the fact that some of the people have possibly experienced violent encounters, and that some of what they might hear during this training might upset them, might cause them to feel a sense of anxiety, and that if that's the case, it's absolutely appropriate and okay and safe for them to step out of the room if they need to talk to me personally or privately to discuss something further. But that is something I think is important to acknowledge no matter what kind of training it, whether it's the mental. And so sometimes my husband and I co-teach together, and he's a defensive tactics instructor, so we do what I do, the mindset, the situational awareness, and we do some simple defensive tactics primarily designed to escape and quickly incapacitate somebody to again escape. But yeah, I have had situations where I think probably the first firearms training course that I took, which was a 4-day course, and it encompassed a night shoot. And I remember it was like 4 months after the home invasion, and just looking up at the sky and thinking, what am I doing here? How did I get here? This is nothing. We never had a problem with anybody owning firearms, but we just didn't feel the need to have them ourselves, and might have thought that those who did feel the need to carry regularly might have been bordered on being paranoid. But and I have of course I have a completely different mindset now because I realized that everything I knew about firearms I had learned from watching movies or
Mhm.
watching the news. Not a good way to learn about firearms. They're an amazing tool if used safely and appropriately. But yeah, I agree with you that that's more common that women will seek defensive tactics training after a traumatic event. And if they don't get this kind of training, the situational awareness and understanding really that you've been managing risk all your life, you can still do it with this, then it's harder for them to accept that those physical defensive tactics. And that's another reason I believe it's so important to get situational awareness training and risk management training out there to the general population more than a defensive tactics class. I I've often said that one of the reasons defensive tactics training does sell more than the type of mindset and situational awareness is you can't post a photo of yourself on social media looking like a badass when what you're doing is sharpening your mind. And I'm sure you've read The Art of War. I can't remember the author's name. I should be able to just rattle it off. But, he talks a lot about the battle that's never fought. You don't get any honor or glory for that because, you know, who knows? Did you just deter it or would it have never happened?
Yeah, nobody's gonna pay $20 to see a movie about Jason Statham avoiding fights for 2 hours. Right?
Exactly.
It's not as sexy, but but it is vastly important. And I do like the point you just made there, and I'd love for you to expand on it a bit, where we all have situational awareness, defensive tactics skills. We have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to survive. Our bodies and minds are primed to know when there's a saber-toothed tiger in that cave
Yeah.
and to go to another cave. And I think we are socially programmed to ignore or suppress some of those in the names of just being socially polite, and
Yes.
also just kind of lose that habit. And now in the age of distractibility, we set those free. But you speak in your presentations about how, no, we already know how to do this. We just need to realize and remember what stupendous survival machines humans are.
Absolutely. Not just humans, everything on
Yeah.
this planet, plants. I found the coolest shells on the beach that had some kind of mollusk, but it had little spikes on it. And I thought, this is created to survive. Every living thing, from a plant to a rabbit to a human, has been created to survive. And I I can give you a perfect example. We have this huge palm in our backyard. It's called a fishtail palm. And it got a little damage and started leaning in the last hurricanes. And so just a couple of days ago, my husband and I were out there cutting some of the stems, the stalks. Well, he breathed in a lot of the dust or the sawdust from it. I got scratched by it. His throat and cheeks inside his mouth started swelling up. I got welts on my body. I mean, this is from a plant. So how much more can we, with our mental ability, survive whatever life can throw at us? Now, this is something else that I do like to point out is that there are going to be exceptions to that. Not every violent incident is 100% avoidable. And we've seen this. We saw it New Year's Eve with the drive-through attack in New Orleans. Those people. If I had been there, I wouldn't have been able to avoid it because some things you just can't avoid. But some of the scenarios, especially that are set up in self-defense classes, and I still do defensive tactics. I'm my husband's default training partner, much to my dismay often. But when I'm supposed to be practicing a move to get out from somebody holding a knife to my neck, I sometimes jokingly say, "So how did I get into this situation? How
Mhm.
did I not notice this person coming up with a knife? How did this happen? How did I get here?"
Yeah.
And they don't talk about that. It's just like this is something that's going to happen out, materialize out of thin air, and you need to know this move and how to break a wrist. And
Yeah. I often, when over the years of teaching, you'll be in that class. Well, what if he has a knife? Well, you can do this. Well, what if there's two of them? Well, you can do this. Well, what if there's three of them and two of them have guns? Well, then you need to seriously re-examine your life choices.
yeah, where are you going that you're encountering these people?
Yeah, one fellow that I like to work with, Rory Miller, he wrote Meditations on Violence and such. When knife disarms come up, he says, the best defense against knives? Don't be the kind of guy someone wants to stab.
Exactly. Another point about defensive tactics, and
Yeah.
I do believe there's a lot of value in defensive
Mhm.
tactics. I
Yeah.
absolutely. as a woman who's 62 years old now, my desire to be really skilled in defensive tactics is getting less and less as my desire to avoid that, because I just know that physically my strength is not going up over the course of the decades. But when you're training for defensive tactics, you're training with a compliant, nonviolent partner.
Mhm.
That is not what you're going to encounter when you need to use those defensive tactic skills. You're going to be getting hit. You're going to be getting injured severely, possibly. And they're not going to be compliant. They're not going to stand still with one and hold one arm, not punching you while you're trying your fancy move on the other. So,
Yeah.
and if you do situational awareness training, your ability to respond
Mhm.
appropriately with your defensive tactics goes way up. I mean, then it's a response instead of a reaction.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's if you're looking for defensive hand to hand training, and what you're looking for is to be able to hold your own in a physical altercation, which again, your whole book and the whole vibe here is there are so many ways to avoid ever having to do that. You want a class where you have some competitive and some resistance training and some pressure testing. Because if you're just kind of going through it with your partner and they're complying and coaching and saying, no, a little more to the left. Oh, there it is. The experience when you're attacked
Yep,
is not going to match that. Now, if what you want to do is learn a little self-defense while rolling around on the mats and join what I like to call a violent group fitness class, that's great because if you look at the causes of death in North America, you go get some cardio 3 times a week and have fun while you're at it. That is as likely to save your life, if not more.
absolutely.
Yeah, I had an experience fairly recently where I was assaulted, and this was a 180-pound construction worker, but he was not trained, and I'd spent quite a bit of time training in classes with resistance, and it was like the guy was made out of paper.
Wow.
Because not because I'm a badass, but because I've been spending 30 years moving large athletic people who know how not to be moved.
Leverage.
Yeah, if you get into a class where you do have that resistance training and that pressure testing, this person who's attacked you, who most of the time is not particularly healthy, has not been taking care of themselves, um, is much less scary in reality than the 6 foot college athlete fresh out of the Marine Corps who you've been pushing up against 3 times a week for the last 5 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that does bring another point that I love for any martial arts instructors who are watching, self defense teachers that are watching. A pet peeve of mine is when 6 feet, 220 pounds of a college wrestler tells a 5 foot woman who, if she weighs 110 pounds, she's holding a cat. What's what about self defense? What are some things that, because a lot of the self defense instructors are those high school and college athletes who have military or law enforcement or competition experience, whose who exist in a physical world that is entirely different than a lot of women who come in for self defense training. So, what kind of advice would you have for those kind of teachers and for parents finding self defense instructors for their daughters and wives and nieces?
Well, I'm going to start with the parents because that's a conversation that I have had with parents in the past when they've suggested that their first course of action for protecting their daughters is to enroll them in self-defense training. I say, well, what about situational awareness and risk management and avoidance and prevention? Because what you need to understand is what you are preparing your child to do is have a violent encounter, which means that as much or as little as their fists and arms and feet are doing, they are getting done probably a lot harder and worse to them. So if that's what you want to imagine your child experiencing and that's what you want to focus on, as opposed to teaching them avoidance and how to de-escalate and just to not be taking those risks, then you need to accept that that's a reality. And yeah, for those big, and my husband is one of those, he's 240 pounds. He is a walking brick wall, and he has decades of defensive tactics training and instruction experience himself. So what he is able to do is completely different from what I can do, even though I, at this point, have going on 2 decades of defensive tactics training myself. I still know that physically, I just will never be able to do what a man, even a man that's 150 pounds, I can't do. So I think it does a disservice to students if instructors can't stop and take that time and acknowledge that difference, because it is a difference. And one of the things that my husband has said to our joint classes is, which I think is brilliant and so illustrative, is he said, a man will fight another man. A man will attack a woman. He doesn't expect a woman to fight back physically and have any real ability to defend herself. But if he goes after a man, he knows that he might possibly get injured. So understanding that difference and just recognizing again that the further out you can notice that something is going to happen, which means paying attention, understanding what is typical and normal for an environment, the more likely you will be to be successful in using a defensive tactics approach. Because again, we know action is faster than reaction, so you don't ever want to be reacting to a violent assault. You want to be responding. At best, you want to be avoiding, but you want to be able to respond because you've had enough time to notice and you're not already in that violent moment.
Absolutely.
Did
And
I
you
answer your question?
absolutely, yes.
Okay.
That's that knowledge, that understanding, paying attention to when you talk to that self-defense instructor. And you go on their website and on their Facebook feed and you see what do they talk about. Are they posting all the trophies their team won this weekend? Are they just posting iterations of their resume? Are they posting knowledgeable articles by people who know what they're talking about that address self-defense and other aspects of safety like fire safety and first aid?
Yeah,
These are you can tell pretty quickly what they're about. And,
right.
and again, if your goal in martial arts is to have a really fun time practicing violent skills and getting in good shape and developing a knowledge of martial arts and its history and its traditions, it's a whole lot better than sitting at home watching Netflix. And it will improve your life immeasurably. And like I mentioned earlier, that regular cardio, that regular
Yep.
stretching and the building of balance will save your life against things that are much more likely to happen to people who live in North America who can afford martial arts lessons.
Right. Oh,
Right.
I
Nothing wrong with
absolutely
that.
think that defensive tactics training has
Yeah.
tremendous value. For the physical fitness aspect, as you mentioned, also just the self-confidence, knowing that you have the ability to take some tough knocks and that you can survive it. Because let's be honest, a lot of defensive tactics instructors have never had the direct personal experience of being violently assaulted. So until that's happened, you don't really know how you're going to respond, no matter what your skill set is. So yeah, having defensive tactics training, I believe, is very important. To go back to your question for uh, defensive tactics instructors once more, I think another important thing is for them to teach women to not try to use strength against strength, but to use strength against weakness. So I know from personal experience when confronted with direct violence, losing fine motor skills is very, very real. And when I'm taught, since this is on video, my fingers, when I realized that a home invader was in our bedroom standing right next to my bed, my fingers were locked into claws. Now, if I had the training that I have now, would I have been able to press the trigger on a firearm? I don't know. But I do know that these claws, these locked fingers to somebody's eyes or a palm to the nose, that would be pretty, you know, interruptive. And really, when seconds count, if you can just get a few extra seconds to get more distance, get some shielding, that right there will benefit you more than learning how to, get out from a mount. you know?
Yeah, yeah, that's those fiddly wrist locks that look so good in the movies. They're fun. I'm not sure I would trust them when my hands are doing this.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
and
it was quite the experience, that feeling.
you mentioned this very early. It's important if you're going to try to pick up weapons and train with weapons. Practicing accessing and deploying it is huge. When you send your kid to college and give them a pepper spray, doing this is not a natural
Yeah.
reaction, and it relies on a finger that's probably going to be pointing it the wrong way, let alone digging in here to find it
Yep.
in the moment.
Yep.
So getting that 1,000 repetitions, 5,000, 10,000
Absolutely.
repetitions of reaching into there, finding it, pulling it out if you're going to
Yep.
use any weapon at all. That's
Yep.
one of the reasons that I really recommend a good high lumen flashlight.
I was just thinking that's the first thing I recommend to people,
Yeah.
especially people who have young children in their home and don't want to have a firearm that's really readily accessible. I say keeping that next to your bed, that gives you distance. That distant more distance gives you time, and it can be used as a striking instrument if necessary, if that happens. But absolutely, it's the number one tool I recommend for personal protection to people.
Yeah, because as you say, it's from a distance. That light, you get those high lumen ones. They've been known to dazzle grizzly bears. And
Yep,
in a low light environment where most attacks happen, it is going to buy you a second or two. Plus, you've deployed and used your flashlight thousands upon thousands of times. Your hands know how to do it without you having to remember.
yep.
That's an immensely important part of it.
I even tell people, I say, if I go out walking my dog at night, I don't wait for something to pop out to turn my flashlight on. I have it on and I'm shining it up ahead into the bushes. Who if somebody was hiding in the bushes, who would they think I am? They think I was a police officer looking for somebody in the bushes, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't be the person they're going to choose because they can see I'm aware at a distance of what's happening. Not to mention, I can see things from a distance. So,
Yeah.
yeah, flashlights absolutely for the win.
And to your point of time and distance, because time and distance are largely the same thing in most encounters we're going to talk about. You put that light on somebody up ahead, that kind of forces them to reveal their intention
Yep,
from 10 feet, 15 feet. It's like, hey,
absolutely.
how you doing there? What's going on? And they're either going to make an excuse and walk away, or they're going to engage with you in a way that lets you know, crap.
Yep,
But you'll know that from 15 feet, 10 feet, not from when they're up there and you're looking at your watch.
exactly. Yeah.
Now, we've mentioned time and we mentioned distance. You also talk about shielding. And that's a piece that a lot of the civilian situational awareness training out there doesn't touch on at all. So could we talk about that a bit, starting with what do you mean by shielding in this context?
So for me, when I talk about shielding, I talk about either a visual shield or a physical shield that will prevent direct contact. So I'm going to actually use um, vehicles right now as an example. When we think that the car itself is the shield, but what we're trying to do is minimize risk, right? Minimize risk for harm. So in the car, what is shielding us from direct harm is the airbag and the seatbelt. So that's a everyday example of shielding because it doesn't prevent collisions, but it does minimize the impact of the harm by shielding us from banging around as much. So, in the case of your home, I have some neighbors across the street who I love. They don't have any curtains on their living room window, and it makes me crazy. I can look across there at night and see them in there. I, it's such a simple thing. If somebody can't see inside your home, if they can't see you, chances of them trying to target you are minimized. And this is what we want to do is just decrease our chances of being targeted. So if somebody can't see what's inside, their likelihood of choosing that as a place they're going to target is one thing. And if we're talking about a situation where you find yourself in an active violent encounter or situation, an active shooting, let's say, if you can conceal yourself and obviously getting cover to that, from something that will prevent penetration of a bullet is ideal. But if you at least can conceal yourself in a place that you can still have movement and be able to get out, not block yourself into a closet where you can't move if they find you in there, then again, your chances of being targeted or impacted are minimized because they can't see you're there. But also using physical shielding. If somebody is, following you through a grocery store and they finally come up and engage with you in an aggressive way, keeping your grocery cart in between you and them, just again, it increases distance. So it's to me, I see it all the time. We watch a lot of, the police encounters and all of those other kinds of wild encounters, and I'm like, get on the other side of the car, get behind that tree, get something in between you, just something that makes them have to, move themselves, something that
Yeah.
takes away their advantage. So,
Yeah. I like there's kind of two kinds of shielding you're talking about. There's that physical shielding, going back to cars, for example, where you've got your seat belt, you've got your airbags, you've got the crumple zones that are built into cars now that bleed off all that kinetic energy before it gets to you. But there's also conceptual shielding, like
yeah,
a crosswalk
yes,
that just reduces your chances. Or in your house, you've got that physical shielding, like good locks on the door, but conceptual shielding, like curtains.
yeah.
A really good example of conceptual shielding that I know my listeners have heard before, but if this is your first time, a few years ago, my wife and I were going to a concert in downtown Portland, which is not as scary as the news would have you say, but it is it's a major metropolitan city. And, concert venues don't tend to be in the best parts of town. I'm me, and she grew up in a major city, so she walks like she knows, like she will eat your face. And we're walking along, and it's about 7 blocks, and I noticed that at about 2 blocks into this walk, a young woman, probably late 20s, maybe early 30s, in business casual dress, clearly coming off work late, sped up until she was about 6 feet behind us, and then slowed down to stay with us. And I asked her, she's drafting off of us, isn't she? And my wife says, yeah, leave her alone. So she clearly was just walking close, not so close to us to freak us out, but close enough that any observing predator would think she was with this middle-aged couple. And it was a very
That's pretty
smart,
smart.
yeah. And I asked Beverly Baker, one of my go-to women's self-defense people, and said, "I do you think what I think was happening is happening?" She says, "Oh yeah, that happens all the time. It's totally a thing." Which I never would have occurred to me because of my own experience and context. But it was a perfect example of conceptual shielding because
Yep.
she was with the herd now, so the lion
Yep.
in the grass will look for somebody else.
Yep. Yeah, I advise young women who are having to use public transportation, when you get on the bus or the train, don't look for the first empty seat. Look for a seat with a mature female or a businessman looking and sit with them because then nobody else is going to be able to choose you to sit next to.
Yeah.
And that's and they might assume that you are with that person and multiple people.
Mm. Yeah, you
Yeah,
find that person with the mom energy or the dad energy who's sitting by themselves, and you just plop down
exactly.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Choose who
And
you want to sit with so somebody doesn't choose you as who they want to sit with.
that's very similar to the advice that we give kids about if you need to approach a stranger for help. You don't wait for a stranger to approach and offer help. You go pick a safe stranger and ask them. It's
Yeah.
it's funny how all these things just connect. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And it seems
yeah.
so straightforward and
Yeah.
easy to I also use the for kids and young women the image of a hissing cat. I'll show a picture of a hissing cat and say, how many of you would willingly grab that cat? And nobody ever, only once did somebody raise their hand, and she was kind of not the most pleasant participant in a workshop I've
Mhm.
had, so I wasn't surprised. But I say, don't you think with another 100 pounds plus on you that you could posture up to a degree that somebody might be deterred from choosing you as a target? So, you know, remember the hissing cat, be the hissing cat.
Yeah. Absolutely. We got three cats around here. It's like, you see this scar? Right?
There's a video from years ago.
Yeah.
Some, I think, animal control guy was showing off this cat, or I'm not sure what his role was, but he was talking about how nice and friendly this cat was. And through the video, the cat proceeded to wrap himself around and was clawing this guy, and he was screaming because this little cat was, yeah.
Yeah. Remember, 5 out of 6 ends are pointy. Uh, Now, I can't remember which self-defense instructor wasn't entirely joking when he recommended if there's a home invader in the middle of the night, you throw your cat at their face.
Oh,
I mean, it's funny, but oh my God.
I, that would give you time, right? When seconds count, any distraction. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
If your
So,
wife is anything like me, though, she would say, "Don't you dare!" I
oh,
used
oh
to
yeah.
worry more about my dogs, getting injured.
Oh yes. Yes,
Yeah.
she is. She would definitely protect the cat, probably over me, but
Yeah.
not over our kids. Um, So I wanted to ask you also in this journey that you've had, what were some of the most surprising things that you noticed or learned?
That's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that. I think just the lack of just finding out how many people just really don't want to put in the effort to prevent or avoid a violent encounter, that surprises me. That if you tell someone, hey, there's a better way to live a safe life than going to just counting on defensive tactics, they're not necessarily interested in that. It seems that we really, as a society, have delegated our personal protection to that's the role of police. Police are that's the role of police is to keep us safe and protect us. And when I say, well, no, because they can't do anything until the damage is done. That's when police step in. They clean up the mess. Trust me, I know you. When violence strikes, you are your sole protection. So
When seconds count, the police are minutes away.
exactly, and not through any
Um,
disregard for human safety or anything, but just that's the reality. There's
yeah.
so many more of us than there are police officers. And again, they can't arrest someone or approach someone even if they think, well, you look like maybe you were going to go target that person over there. That's until it's already happened. So I think that that's just really been my biggest surprise and my biggest frustration is that the primary focus that is presented as this is how you stay safe in life is to learn how to fight back in some way, get a gun, um, is I I just can't help but see how much better we would be and safer as a society, and it would be easier for law enforcement to do their jobs if we were all equipped with basic situational awareness skills, because then we'd be less, like, criminals would have to actually work harder. They'd have to find those easy, soft targets. And if we were all trained beginning in childhood, like we are in nutrition, you give a kid a donut and a carrot, and you say, which one's the healthy one? They could tell you which one is the healthy one. They don't need to know about biochemistry or anything like that to know. Because they've been given the basic principles of nutrition. And I think the same can be done with the basic principles of risk management and personal protection. We just
Absolutely.
haven't done that. So
Now, which of those they'll choose to eat on a given day is a whole other
exactly,
a whole other
exactly.
conversation.
Right.
And
And
I think that's part of what you're talking about there. That engaging with the reality of crime is scary and unpleasant.
yep,
And I think
yes.
and sitting on the on public transportation, looking around instead of playing another round of Candy Crush or whatever people are playing, is less fun.
Yeah.
But it can also be because you do spot the sunsets and you do see that lovely cathedral that's on the bus route that you never noticed before. And you do
Yeah.
hear that hilarious conversation between a harried mom and her third toddler who's asked why for the 17th time. And
Absolutely.
you hear all of those things. And what's kind of fun also on public transportation and in waiting rooms these days is you look around and the only other person who's not on their phone notices you looking around. You kind of notice each other noticing each other. And then there's
Yep.
that quick little calculus of, okay, are you a bad guy or are you a good
Yeah.
guy? And then the next thing you know, you're both talking about the martial arts tournament you were both at 7 years ago.
Right.
It's
Yes.
the
All these missed connections,
Yeah.
all these missed uh,
mhm,
facial expressions that if you hadn't been paying attention, you might have missed, that
mhm,
give us so much information. And really, it's how we engage with each other. If
yeah.
we're constantly looking into what is a virtual bottomless pit of social
Mhm.
media of people who you don't even necessarily know, instead of the person who's next to you, yeah, you miss those connections and hearing stories from people's pasts and wow, we were at the same martial arts test or tournament 7 years ago.
Yeah. No, it is, and that's one of the things I really appreciate from the vibe of your book and the vibe of what you teach is approaching situational awareness, approaching risk management from that sense of alertness and curiosity and joy, not from fear and loathing. And it's one of those things that I think a lot of courses like this miss. And it addresses one of the final things that I think is really important, and I'd love to have some of your advice about it. Talking about these things with our kids, a lot of the pushback I get is, but I don't want to scare my 4-year-old. But your 4-year-old knows how to cross the street,
Yep.
but they're not afraid of streets or cars.
Exactly, because you've taught them how to manage risk. So, in the book, I use the game of hide and seek as an example of how kids practice managing risk for harm from threats of human nature. We don't refer to it as the predator and prey game. It's called hide and seek, but the way kids stay safe is the same way they stay safe playing that game. And just teaching them, I I think the most important thing that parents can teach their children is that they will honor their child's no. I don't want a touch right now from you, from my Aunt Donna. And before I even did this training, so my background is actually in speech language pathology. So I worked for years with kids and their families who had speech and language disorders. So empowering them to communicate their wants and needs has always been like in my line of sight. And so when my siblings started having kids and we would have family gatherings, when it came time for us to leave, the kids would be overstimulated and tired and no, they don't want a hug and a kiss goodbye from aunt. And the brother and sister, well, we can't, in their minds thinking, well, we don't want Aunt Donna to feel bad. So no, you get it and you give her a hug goodbye. And I would say, no, they need to know that if they don't want a touch from somebody in their family, a physical touch, that they can say no. Because if they can't say no in the safety of their home and their family, they won't feel like they can say no to somebody who's in a position of authority in other areas of their life, like their teachers, their doctors. And so I think also teaching, you can teach kids without scaring them what is expected and you can play, because kids are good at learning opposites. So what would be opposite of we're going to McDonald's? Who are we going to see there? We're going to see families. We're going to see teenagers. We're going to see old people. We're going to see people who work there. What would be unexpected to see there? People fighting, people. So just teaching kids to be aware of this is expected. This is a place that's a happy event. So people should be happy. So what would be opposite of happy? Mad, yelling, we're going to a movie. Are people going to be talking and yelling at each other? Or are they going to be quiet and watching the movie? If you heard a loud sound in a movie theater that wasn't part of the movie, would that be expected or would that be unexpected? So just teaching them to pay attention to those things, because if you can teach them that all you want to do is make sure you stay as far away as possible from something that shouldn't be happening, something that's opposite or unexpected, because you know that when you go to the classroom, this is expected and this is not expected, then they don't have to decide, oh, this is dangerous.
Yeah.
It's just different. So I don't have to worry that I'm being a bad person and I'm judging somebody. And that's why another reason I use the erratic driver analogy a lot. When we're driving and we see an erratic driver, we don't we automatically move away. Like we don't stop and say, "Oh, is there a rational reason for this person to be driving? Am I a bad person? Am I judging this person by moving away?" No, because we're not judging that person, we're judging our personal risk for harm and our level of safety. So when we make it our own and we give them that internal locus of control, that's when kids can learn to manage their safety independently without feeling fear.
For all the tactical listeners out there, she's talking about baseline.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
without the jargon. Uh, but yeah, and yeah, that's a great idea because you are teaching your children the tactical concept of baseline,
yep,
deviation from the norm. I often use a bar. I'm a heavy metal fan, so when I go to bars, which I don't do much because I'm also in my 50s, um, I expect them to be loud and have a lot of
yes,
energy. And there's guys slamming into me in the pit, right? That is expected. None of that
right,
indicates danger. But if I walk to
right,
that same club and it's really quiet and people are standing still, I'm turning around and leaving the bar immediately.
yes,
That's a
yes,
because something bad is about to happen, is happening, or just happened, and the cops are going to arrive.
right,
None of which
right.
are anything I want a piece of. But yeah, that,
And
that
that,
idea of teaching our kids baseline by just, hey, what do you expect? That's a great game
yeah,
to play. I'm gonna add it to my
yeah. Who are we going to see?
yeah.
And it does, and you can also teach them from a young age to, we used to play slug bug as kids. I know that's not a hip game anymore, but you can just teach them find the exits.
Yeah.
The word exit is very distinctive. It's
Yeah.
visually. they don't even have to know the alphabet to be able to identify. And so you can make a game of it. Hey, find it, whoever finds the exit sign that's closest to us gets a penny or quarter, whatever reward you want to give them. But I also think that you can teach kids how to identify dominant body language, which
Mm.
we know is a manifestation of the fight response driven by the limbic system. So if you can practice
Yeah.
watching people's interactions. Who do you think is the most important person in that group? Who do you think gets picked on the most? Who do you think does anybody look afraid? Do you think those people are family or friends? And just identifying the interactions between people so that they learn that's a way they can, you know,
Yeah.
learn information about those who are around them.
Yeah.
It
There's
doesn't
a
have to be assigned to a dangerous or not dangerous.
because you're practicing analyzing that body language. My wife plays a game. It's a little snarky and a little mean, but it's fun. She calls mates or dates.
Oh,
We just watch a man, find a man and a woman in the restaurant. All right, are they on a date or aren't they? Oh, he thinks it's a date, but
yes,
he's wrong.
yes.
Or
I
it's
think
a
that's a
date and
great.
he's getting the hell out of here.
That's
Yeah,
a fun game, and that I could
yeah,
see. I could see teens and young women having fun with that. And
yeah.
um, who do you think he's a traditional? I'm the boss. I wear the pants in the
Mhm.
old fashioned kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, or even with grade school kids, a game that I played with my littles when they were at that age was, hey, what do you think they're talking about, and why?
Yes.
And sometimes it gets silly. Oh, they're clearly talking about unicorns, uh, but sometimes they take a look at the body language and figure out I think they're having an argument.
Yes. See, that kind of stuff right
Mm.
there can give our kids so much more information
Yeah.
than telling them, don't look for this, don't,
Mm.
this is a problem, this is not, just giving them the basic principles. And that is what I tried to do in the book. And, the book ended up being so much shorter than the original version. I ended up taking out a lot of content because, for one, again, I don't believe the average person seeks out this type of information and wants to consume it just because they want to. Um, but I just wanted to give the basic principles of situational awareness, of risk management, and let people figure out how to apply that no matter where they live in the country, no matter what age group. Because if I just wrote to people in my age group or to young women, well, what's appropriate for them and the environments they're going to be in are going to be very different. So, if you just have the basic principles, then that applies no matter what you're doing or where you are.
Absolutely, and it is a shorter book, but like Mark Twain said that one time, I wrote you a long letter because I didn't have the time to write you a short one. You did pull
Oh,
out
I
the fun.
love that. I love that.
Yes, having
Yeah.
written the book, you feel the pain.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, living. Hard target living is. I've read a lot of books on situational awareness in the last 5 years since starting this project, and it is absolutely the most accessible, least doom and gloomy version
Thank
of this book that I've
you.
seen. And so, as somebody who, if this is something you're interested in adding into your life in a non-threatening, non-terrifying, non-head on a swivel, back to the wall way, I absolutely recommend it. And Donna,
Thank
you
you
haven't
so
just
much.
written a book. Where can people find you and your stuff?
You can go to hardtargetliving.com. There is a contact us form on there. And in fact, I am just polishing up a train the trainer program so that I can certify professionals, whether they're former law enforcement or security or just people who are interested in personal safety and think they'd want to teach this content. I developed a curriculum before I even wrote the book. And it would be awesome to get a bunch of hard target living instructors out there and spread this information so that we can just be a nation of hard targets and lower crime by reducing the number of easy targets that are out there in the world.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for writing this book, and thank you for coming on the show, Donna.
Thank
Really
you so
enjoyed
much.
that.
It's been a pleasure. You're actually a great interviewer.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much. I try hard. But thank you all for watching, and do go check out Donna's stuff. It is absolutely fantastic. Stay safe, everybody. We'll see you next time.
The best time to make your family safer is yesterday. The second best is right now. So take a minute to identify one thing you learned from this interview that you can take action on today, and another you can make a longer-term project. Speaking of action, if I earned it today, go ahead and hit those like and subscribe buttons. I'm not sure why it helps as much as it does, but it's absolutely essential for a growing channel like this one. If you'd like to support this mission even more deeply, you can sign up for a newsletter and bonus content free over at our Patreon. You'll find the link here. As always, thanks for listening. Stay safe. See you next time.